The Earth and the Moon have been there long before mankind populated the Earth. They formed over 4.6 billion years ago out of a mixture of dust and gas around the young Sun. And since then the Moon has been rotating around the Earth. The Earth rotates around itself and both rotate around the Sun. The rotation of the Earth explains why we see the Moon rise in the east and then later in the evening set in the west every day, just like the Sun. This, however, does not explain why the Moon has different shapes and sometimes is not there at all. Let's therefore look at the moon phases and their explanation. As we have seen, the Moon is rotating around the Earth. A full rotation takes 29.5 days. Remember this number as we will use it later. After 29.5 days, it will be back there where it started. And here is where we start our journey. The Moon is now standing between the Sun and the Earth. Since the Moon is a dark object, it is visible only when it is illuminated by the Sun. In this position, the light coming from the Sun illuminates the back of the Moon. So the only part of the Moon which is visible is placed on the back, with the front being completely dark. At this point, if we look at the sky looking for the Moon from the surface of the Earth, we will not be able to see it, as we will be looking at the side that is completely in the dark. This phase where the Moon is not visible to us is called new moon. Let's now keep following the Moon as it travels trough space around the Earth. And let's take a short break once it has traveled 45 degrees. The Moon will be illuminated by the Sun just as before, but now due to the relative position towards the Earth, a little slice of the illuminated surface will be visible to us looking at the sky. So standing on Earth and looking at the Moon, we would now see the first illuminated slice of the surface of the Moon. This is called waxing crescent. Let's now follow the Moon flight further. Next stop is at 90 degrees. Still, like before, only half of the Moon is illuminated by the Sun, but now a much bigger portion of the surface is visible to us. That is, from the Earth looking at the Moon, we can see half of the visible hemisphere. This is called first quarter. So it should be clear by now that the reason why in different days we can see different portion of the Moon, what is referred to as the moon phases, it is due to what part of the illuminated surface of the Moon we are able to see due to the Moon position in space around the Earth. Let's continue now to follow the Moon in its journey around the Earth. Once 3/4 of the lunar hemisphere are visible, that will be called waxing gibbous. So far the Moon has been growing day by day. Now we reached halfway of the journey. The whole visible hemisphere is illuminated by the Sun, and we reached what is called full moon. From now on, the Moon will start to decrease again. When the Moon is down to be only 3/4 visible, it is called waning gibbous. The name of the two remaining moon phases are third quarter and waning crescent. And so, 29.5 days after its start, the journey of the Moon around the Earth is complete. The history of the Moonphase Complication in watches. The sun's rhythm may have set the pace of each day, but when early humans needed a way to keep time beyond a single day and night, they looked to a second light in the sky. The moon was one of humankind's first timepieces, long before the first written language, before the earliest organized cities, and well before structured religions. The moon's face changes nightly and with the regularity of the seasons, making it a reliable marker of time. Ancient origins. The moon in timekeeping. The moon has been a fundamental timekeeping tool for civilization since antiquity. Early societies relied on lunar cycles to track time, create calendars, and plan agricultural activities. The lunar month, approximately 29.5 days, was a natural way to divide the year. Ancient devices like the Antikythera mechanism, circa 150–100 before Christ, included lunar phase indicators, showcasing the early integration of moon phase tracking into mechanical systems. The birth of the moon phase complication in clocks. The moon phase complication first appeared in mechanical clocks during the Renaissance, a period marked by advancements in astronomy and horology. Clockmakers in the 16th and 17th centuries began incorporating moon phase displays into elaborate astronomical clocks, often found in town squares or cathedrals. These clocks not only told time, but also displayed celestial information, including the phases of the moon, as a way to demonstrate the harmony between heaven and earth. One of the most famous examples is the Prague astronomical clock built in 1410, which features a moon phase display alongside other astronomical indicators. These early moon phase mechanisms were driven by gears that approximated the lunar cycle, often using a 59-tooth wheel to represent the 29.5-day cycle, since 59 divided by 2 equals 29.5. Transition to pocket watches. As portable timekeeping devices became more sophisticated, the moon phase complication found its way into pocket watches. By the 17th and 18th centuries, watchmakers began creating intricate pocket watches for wealthy patrons, often including astronomical complications like moon phase displays. These watches were not only functional but also status symbols, showcasing the owner's appreciation for science and art. One notable example is the work of Abraham Louis Breguet, who created highly accurate moon phase pocket watches in the late 17th century. Other Swiss watchmakers, particularly those in Geneva, also embraced the complication, incorporating it into their ornate and highly decorative timepieces. The Golden Age of wristwatches. The moon phase complication transitioned to wristwatches in the early 20th century, as pocket watches fell out of favor. During the 1920s and 1930s, watchmakers began experimenting with smaller, more compact movements that could accommodate complications like moon phase displays. Patek Philippe, one of the most renowned Swiss watchmakers, introduced its first moon phase wristwatch in 1925, setting a standard for elegance and precision. The mid-20th century saw the moon phase complication become a staple of haute horlogerie. Brands like Jaeger-LeCoultre, Omega, and Audemars Piguet incorporated moon phase displays into their designs, often pairing them with other complications like perpetual calendars or chronographs. These watches were prized for their technical sophistication and aesthetic appeal. Modern interpretations. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the moon phase complication experienced a resurgence in popularity. Watchmakers began reinterpreting the traditional moon phase display, experimenting with new materials, designs, and levels of accuracy. For example, A. Lange & Söhne's Lange 1 moon phase and Blancpain's Villeret Quantième Complète are celebrated for their precision and artistry. Some brands have pushed the boundaries of the Moonphase Complication even further. For instance, Andreas Strehler's Sauterelle à Lune Perpétuelle features a moon phase display accurate to 1 day in 2 million years, while Christian van der Klauw's Real Moon series uses a rotating sphere to create a three-dimensional representation of the moon. How does the Moonphase Complication work? No other complication as the moon phase has inspired the fantasy and creativity of master watchmakers. Over the years, many interpretations have been introduced, all bearing different and very creative aesthetics and different movements driving the work. A. Lange and Söhne has a classical approach to moonphase called Busum moonphase. This is the most common style, featuring a semicircular opening that reveals the rotating moon disk. Arnold and Son and many others added a three-dimensional look utilizing a small sphere for the moon. IWC represents, in some of their models, the moon as seen in both hemispheres of the Earth, north and south. Blancpain has chosen for this model to couple the Blossom moon phase display with a vintage-like look. Christopher Ward went all in with a moon that occupies half of the dial as well as a photorealistic representation of the moon surface. Meistersinger also used a photorealistic but very dramatic red moon. Omega has laser hatched their moon for an even more realistic look. But all in all, the boson style of moon phase display is by far the most used. And it has been so since 1925, when Patek Philippe patented the two-moon disc, rotating a full 360 degrees every 2 lunar months implementation of it. Let's take a look at how the moon disk and gear system works. At the heart of the complication is a disk with 2 identical moon illustrations. This disk is connected to a 59-tooth gear, which advances 1 notch per day. When the disk is hidden behind the bosom display, it will look like the moon raising east and going down west. But why a gear with 59 teeth is needed? A full lunar cycle, from new moon to full moon and back, lasts approximately 29.53 days. Since mechanical movements operate in whole numbers, the 59-tooth gear allows the moon disk to cover 2 lunar cycles, 59 days, with 1 rotation of the disk. Let's take a look at a simplified example of how the moon disk is advanced of 1/59th, or approximately 6 degrees every day. A train of gears will make sure that the gear in the middle rotates exactly once every 24 hours. The cam on this gear will apply a little force to the moon disk gear and rotate it by 1 notch. A pawl or a ratchet mechanism makes sure that the disk advances only 1 step at the time. We have only one thing left to look at. As mentioned before, the actual lunar cycle is 29.53059 days, and not exactly 29.5, which is what the 59-teeth gear is based on. This traditional setup accumulates a small error over time. Basic moon phase complications will be off by about 1 full day every 2.5 years. For this reason, some high-end watches improve accuracy by using a 135-tooth gear, which reduces the deviation to just 1 day every 122 years. Ultra-precise versions can extend accuracy even further, requiring a correction only once every 1,000 plus years. Now that we know a lot about moon phases and how the complication works in watches, we have one thing left, and that is to set up our watch so that it reflects the correct moon phase right now. Fortunately, this is truly easy to do. As you can see, today is the 9th of February 2025, and the moon is 92% towards being full moon, what we called before waxing gibbous. Most watches have a corrector to quickly change the position of the moon. If you don't, then this guide unfortunately is not applicable to your watch, and you need to consult your user manual. Each push of the corrector advances the moon corresponding to 1 day. Now, trying to figure out where exactly 92% waxing gibbous is would be rather complex, but there is a much easier way. Open the browser on your computer and go to Google for searching. Here type time and date as one word, Moonphase, and the name of the closest city to you. The result will take you directly to the Moonphase section of the time and date website, specific for your geographical position. Here you need to look for when was the last full moon. In our case was the 13th of January. Now go to the top menu to the right and choose Date Calculator. Enter the last full moon date on the start date and choose today for the end date. Do not include today in the calculation and click on Calculate Duration. The result is 27 days since the last full moon. Now back to our watch. Press the corrector until you position the moon in the middle of the bosom display. That is where the full moon is visible. Now, push the corrector the number of days since the last full moon, in our case that is 27, and you are done. Now your moon phase display mirrors exactly the phase the moon is in the sky. I hope you have enjoyed this a little different episode, and as always, be kind, be strong, be well. My little watch box. If you found this video useful, please do not forget to push the buttons to like it, share it, add your comments, and even better, subscribe to the channel. I greatly appreciate it. All the best. Alex.